The second part of this question: if the manufacturer replaces all his screw producing machines, causing the proportion of defective screws to drop to only 4%, it was 10% in part A, so now we're dealing with a P value of 4%, or as a decimal 0.04, and now releases lots only if the number of defective screws in the sample of 10, so N is still 10, only releases a lot if the defective screws is now less than 2. So now we're interested in P being, or probability of X being less than 2, not less than 3. Will the proportion of lots rejected decrease? If so, how many screws per lot will the manufacturer expect to save? So what we've got now, we still have our X, and before we said it's a number of defective screws, that's still true. Follows the binomial distribution. N is still 10, but the P value we're now using is 0.04. And for screws to be accepted, what has to happen now to be accepted is that X has to be less than 2. So the first thing we need to work out then in this question is the probability X is less than 2, and we're going to use the N value and the P value we have here. If it's less than 2, it could be 0 or it could be 1. There are no other values, so if we work out those two probabilities and add those together, we'll use the same formula we used last time. The formula was N choose R, P to the R, 1 minus P to the N minus R. So over here, this first calculation will be 10 choose 0, P to the 0, 1 minus P to the 10. And for this calculation it will be 10 choose 1, P to the 1, 1 minus P to the 10 minus 1, and we get these two calculations. If we work both of these out, work this one out on a calculator, you should get 0.665. The second one on a calculator, you should get 0.277. If you add those together, you should get 0.942. So 94.2% would be accepted. But remember, in this question they're actually asking us about the proportion that will be rejected, which is the rest. So if I take that probability away from 1, I will get the proportion or the probability of those that are rejected. If I take that away from 1, I get 0.058, which is the same as 5.8%. So in part A it was 7%, and now it's dropped to be 5.8%. So the question said, has the proportion of rejects decreased? Yes, it has. It's decreased from 7% to 5.8%. And then it says, if so, how many screws per lot will the manufacturer expect to save? Well, the difference between these two figures is 1.2%. So he'll expect now to throw out 1.2% of the lots less. So 1.2% of, and it's 10,000 screws in a lot. So the very final bit, which isn't a probability, it's just sort of going back to get an actual number, 1.2% is his saving. He's saving that amount of 10,000, and if you work out 1.2% of 10,000, you get 120. So by changing the machines, he expects to save 120 screws from being thrown out.